Welcome, everyone, to 8-Bit Politics, your home for political talk with a pop culture twist. I am your host, Ryan Jarvis, and for this episode, my goodness, man, we have a ton of topics to discuss this particular week. And, all of them really deal with still some of the simmering of this past week in terms of the attitudes on behalf of both the left and the right paradigm here in the United States and really in the world in terms of this monumental Trump victory, presidential victory. And what I want to do is talk a little bit about the political situation that the United States is in. I want to talk about the subject as is Trump the new Constantine, and we'll dig more into that here a little bit later. And I also want to talk about Trump's 100-day plan. I've actually had some friends that wanted to know my opinion in terms of that specific plan. And then I also want to talk a little bit about another topic that I've had some people ask me about, because in my last episode, I kind of got on the mainstream media a little bit. And I know a lot of my friends that are liberal and more progressive in terms of their political and social stances. And I really wanted to kind of disclose to them why it is the people like myself who are more libertarian or conservative, why it is that we feel that the mainstream media is kind of in the tank for the Democratic Party and overall progressive politics. And that's something that you don't want to miss later on in the episode. And also, being a fan of pro wrestling, I also want to talk a little bit about the conspiracy. And that is, if our political system is really less organic and more sports entertainment. And for those of you that are fans of politics and pro wrestling, you will definitely want to tune into this episode and kind of get the gist of that. But without further ado, I want to discuss, I came across an article on the website Intellectual Takeout, which I liked on Facebook, and I encourage all of you to do the same thing if you haven't already. It's a very good website that deals with a lot of philosophical questions dealing with politics and religion and so on. And I came across a great article that was written by a man named Joseph Blaise, B-L-I-S-E. And the article was dealing with, is Trump the next Constantine? Now, a lot of people may not be aware of Constantine and exactly what his role was in the Roman Empire, but I do believe that the beginning of this article is really important to kind of set up where I think we are in the United States today and where I think we're moving in the direction of. And Mr. Blaise starts off the article with, quote, "Christians are unable to speak freely. Religious freedom is under attack. Society is materialistic and immoral. Western civilization is facing huge threats from within and from without. And apparently, the one powerful emerging leader is no saint. You're thinking America 2016, huh? No. Rome 312, end quote." And so what Constantine did, for those of you that aren't privy to him, he signed an edict. It's called the Edict of Milan in 313 AD. And what it did was it gave Christians the right to practice their faith and speak freely in the public square, whereas before, the Roman Empire was very antagonistic towards Christianity. You got to understand that Jesus changed the world. And I think that whether you're a person who is a Christian and calls yourself a Christian or a follower of Christ, or you're some denomination in Christendom, or whether you're an atheist for that matter, I think it's hard to disagree with the fact that Christ changed the world. Whether he was a God-man, as he's been put before, or whether he was just a man with a vision, nonetheless, this Jesus changed the world. And his first century followers, really did a lot to expand this message. And they believed so hardly, or so desperately clung to it, that they were being willing to, be hung upside down on crosses or fed to lions in an amphitheater, or be boiled alive in oil. I mean, they would do any number of things because they felt that this Jesus was something important. And I myself feel the same. I've been a Christian since I was 9 years old. Actually, before I was 9 years old, I got baptized in Christ probably just a few days before I turned 9, although I have to say that just like most Christians, I didn't walk that lifestyle until I was in my mid-20s, late 20s, you know. But the point I'm making is that, you know, as a gamer and as a fan of pop culture, there are many things that bring us together. And, you know, I can remember some of my earliest memories sitting around Atari 2600 and playing Spider-Man for the Atari 2600, or playing Pac-Man, or you know, stomping on Bowser, or jumping over him rather, to save my Princess Toadstool. And you know, these things I did with my friends were a way for us to unite and to bond. But, you know, something happens when you start to get older. You know, you start to want to discuss things that I feel are more important to day-to-day living. And for me personally, I have been a fan since my mid to late 20s of political conversation and dialogue. You know, I hate to use the word hell, pardon my French, but, you know, I used to give my professors hell in college because I didn't roll over like a lot of young people. I didn't go for the progressive doctrines of liberalism, because to me, liberalism destroys. It doesn't build. It doesn't conserve. You know, to me, conservatism and libertarianism kind of run a parallel path, in the sense of, you know, we believe in self-reliance. I don't believe that the federal government gives me anything other than supposed to be protection, so that I can make important decisions in my own life, because I'm, again, self-reliant. But one thing that I think is often misunderstood today is that the reason this article was written by Mr. Blaze is because Christianity, whether you want to agree with it or not, is really demonized in our mainstream culture. And one of the reasons for that is because Christianity has some answers for some subjects that are really touchy with people, whether it's gay marriage, whether it's abortion, whether it is, you know, any number of topics, or even just the downfall of the American family unit. You know, there's a lot of things that Christians say that go against the progressive, or what I would call cultural Marxist viewpoint of, you know, of the American social politics, American system. And what that does is Christianity, if it's done right, should not be establishment. Christianity, in many cases, should be counterculture. And Christianity should be given the ability to speak freely about these subjects. And what the article is implying is that Donald Trump is not the perfect man. Constantine was he had his wife murdered. He was, not a good dude. You know what I'm saying? Like, I would not have backed him by any stretch of the imagination. But this guy, this man, clearly history at least acknowledges the fact that he may have had what Christians call a road to Damascus moment. And what that is it kind of mirrors the Apostle Paul, who wrote most of the New Testament. Apostle Paul was a man who, actually was, taking Christians and having them imprisoned. And, he was having Christians killed because, he felt that Christianity not only was something that was taking culture, their society, and really turning it on its ear, but it was just too disruptive. And so they were, killing them. Well, this Paul, according to the scriptures in the book of Acts, ran into this guy named Jesus. You may have heard of him. And long story short, he converted to Christianity and became a powerful minister of God. But, he had a lot of issues. And Constantine obviously had issues. But, I think if he had this road to Damascus moment, then I think that's one of the main reasons he decided to give Christians a voice. And you know what? Christianity from that point forward began to change the world. Missionaries began to go all over the Western hemisphere. And, of course, you know what happened in the United States. When the Mayflower hit the Newfoundland, as we call it, the very first thing they ever did, the very first founding document, political document in our nation's history, is the Mayflower Compact. If you've never read it, I encourage you to do it. But, I'm not going to talk about it here. But the bottom line is Christian immigrants are the ones that came here seeking freedom. And so I think that the way the culture is today, where in television and movies and things like that, they label Christians as troublemakers or bigots, when in actuality, Christianity has made so many positive advents into society throughout its history, that it really is something that should be taken serious. And most people, I believe, in the United States believe that, Christ is real. But I do think that they have a lot of solid differences of opinion in terms of everything from evolution to creationism, to how we should engage in the political realm, how we should proselytize outside the church, and all those things to me are important to discuss. But ultimately, you need to have a culture in which it is okay to have a differing opinion, because I think that this particular article, the reason it struck me so heavily is because if you actually look at colleges today, people used to think it was a joke when we used to say, people like myself who were conservative, that these liberal kids out here today, these millennials, that they have to have safe spaces. We thought it was a joke, but we actually found out that there's freaking colleges that have safe spaces. And to me, it's absolutely absurd, the idea that you're going to an institution of higher learning in which your intellect is going to be challenged, and yet you do not want to be challenged. You want to be controlled and hidden. To me, it's like, when you're playing a video game. I remember back in the day, man, we used to play Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat in the arcades, and I'd get my butt spanked royally by a homie or by some dude who was just chilling in the arcade. He's one of them ghetto vest dudes in there all day long on one quarter, just whooping everybody. But you know what? I had to take my licks, man, and hopefully, prayerfully, I'd get better. But the bottom line is, you can't protect people from speech. And that is when a society gets more and more oppressive. And so do I think that Donald Trump is going to be that guy that might give Christians a voice? Yeah, I think there's going to be more of that. And I know there's going to be some of my more left-wing friends, more of my liberal friends who I love, that might listen to this and say, Ryan, I think Christians have enough voice. I mean, you got a church on every corner. And that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is, if I want to have a debate with you about whether I think a man and a woman should be, or a husband and a wife should be the right family unit for a child, I think the statistics show scientifically that empirically that is what is best for a child, not two men or two women. But that's in the science. But you got to take your emotions out of it, people that believe differently. Or if I come and tell you that, to me personally, I don't think abortion should be legal. I understand people talk about, well, what if a woman's raped, et cetera, et cetera. And you know what? Those are situations that are really dirty and nasty and are hard to really discuss with people who've went through that. And I can't say I've ever been through anything like that, so I'm not going to try to speak as a professional here. But one thing I think about is that I heard a woman when I was doing a research paper back in college about abortion, and this one girl said, you know what, Ryan? Of course, speaking to me, through the camera, not directly. It's not like she was in my living room. But, she said the act of rape that occurred against me was a violent act. And her perspective was I wasn't going to have an abortion because that's just carrying on the violence. And I can understand that. But, there are some people, to me personally, I think that you should be able to give a baby up for adoption or something to that effect. But I don't think murdering a child is the right thing, no matter what. But the flip side of it is most abortions are not done. The stats show they're not done because of rape or incest or because a mother's going to die during birth. They're done for family planning, and really it goes back to Margaret Sanger and her beginning of Planned Parenthood, which is essentially social Darwinism, which is what inspired Hitler. I mean, the idea of only certain people should procreate. That's why, I live in Richmond, Indiana, and we have a part of town called Reveston, which is, really where a lot of our more well-to-do citizens in our county live. But you know what? Planned Parenthood isn't going to be in Reveston, okay? They're going to be in a poor neighborhood. And to me, that is social Darwinism 101 in the 21st century. And maybe for another day, we'll get into a subject like that. But the bottom line is this. A Christian or anybody should be able to disclose an opinion, and we should be able to listen to that opinion. And you don't have to agree with that opinion, but that doesn't mean you start name calling. It doesn't mean you start hurling out bigot, homophobe or any of those types of slurs. And I think because you have a guy like Donald Trump who actually came out and made a video actually speaking to churches just a week or two before the election was over, because he knows that in Europe and in Canada, if you're a Christian pastor, you can literally be fined or go to jail just because you say the word homosexual or you preach something out of the Old Testament. If you felt like you want to discuss that, you can go to jail for words. Okay, that's as Orwellian as you can get. And he knows that there is the far left remnant, this small minority in the Democratic Party, their equivalent of the Klan. Okay, these people, they're full of hatred, they don't like Christians, and they're really in that LGBT movement. They're not the majority, please understand that, but there's a small amount of them that want to see Christians just shut up, stay in their church, stay in your houses, and some of them don't even want us to be there. They want us gone. And I know that sounds conspiratorial, but it's not. It's in the writings. It's there. It's clear. It's over in Europe already. It's in Canada right above us. And so the idea that we're being conspiratorial is not something that is far-fetched, especially when you can see that under President Obama's administration, you were getting the IRS attacking conservative and Christian groups that were, out there trying to kind of put together a conservative point of view, and all those stats are there. The emails were released, so this isn't a conspiracy. All you have to do is take the time to listen to what I'm saying and go back and research it, and you'll see for yourself that sometimes some of our concerns can be warranted, but ultimately I do think Trump's concept and his personality, his orange self, Mr. Carrot himself, I do think, do you ever wonder he's like the carrot from the VeggieTales? Am I the only one that notices this? But, the point is, I do think his ability to just say what he wants is one of the things that got him elected. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. I guess I'll leave it up to you. But ultimately, I do think that Trump, on the positive side, will, I think, just in his candor and how he speaks, I think he will be a person that will, encourage Christians to get more involved with the system and with the social issues of the day, and try to be a voice as well, a voice of reason, because obviously our nation needs to come together, and I don't see it happening right now with the culture that we're in. But ultimately, I think that, oftentimes the right gets labeled as being hateful, or we're hate mongers, or we're sexist, or we're misogynist, and all these different terms, but really it's not true. To me, if you cast those aspersions constantly, then really there's something wrong with your heart, not the person who you're blaming. So, but yeah, that's my view in terms of that particular article. Again, a great read. Definitely check out some more of Joseph Blaze's articles on intellectualtakeout.com or on their Facebook page. But now, moving on to the next thing, I want to talk about the new world order. No, I'm not talking about Hogan, Hall, and Nash, you pro wrestling fans out there. But I want to talk a little about how the world is positioning itself, because I don't know if you noticed that one of the primary things that President Obama wanted to do was to have a better relationship with some of our second and third world nations out there. In Obama's first term, he took the bust of Winston Churchill, who was a famous British politician and dear friend of the United States. He had this bust that had been in the White House for many, many decades, and President Obama shipped it back. You can say why, you can ask why. I say why, ask why. But I have my suspicions, but we won't discuss them here. But the point is, I think that President Obama tried to work more unilaterally. I think he tried to be more humble on the world stage. I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing, but I think he felt that we're America. Doggone it, you listen to us. We're the bosses. We're the parents here, and I go to bed. That type of philosophy that I think he felt that George Bush Jr. kind of displayed. I think he tried to do the complete opposite of that. Now, whether we're safer for that or not is up to you. But the point is, I think that the world stage is going to be quite different after January 20th, 2017. One particular pundit put it that the NWO, or the New World Order, is going to be up for a rude awakening. And to say the New World Order, a lot of times people think conspiracy. But in actuality, George Bush Sr. talked about a new world order with nations and economies back in the early 90s, man. And so this isn't conspiracy. This is legitimate fact. And, even me being a Christian, the Bible talks about that there would be a time in the future where you'd have a one world government, you'd have a one world economy, and you'd have a one world religion. Now, whether what the Bible was saying in the book of Revelation was literal or whether it was analogous and, metaphoric, that's not for me to discuss right now. What I'm really more concerned about, not concerned, but actually enlightened about, or elated rather, is the fact that, a lot of those plans were already in place, but you've seen, like, say, Brexit last year when Britain just completely pulled out of the EU. That, to me, was one of those signs that, that New World Order is slightly crumbling, because people are seeing that these unelected bodies, these unions between nations oftentimes don't work, because ultimately somebody's getting screwed. Somebody is getting reamed. Nobody is going to be without getting bent over a little bit in one of these situations. Pardon the expression, but ultimately it ends up being a couple of nations get the benefit, everybody else gets the condemnation of that decision. And so, I think that what Trump is going to do is he's going to be more of that nationalist perspective of his, which is put America first. His idea of saying "Make America Great Again," his slogan, I know that offends some people, because a lot of people I know say, "Ryan, we're already great. What do you mean make us great again?" I think what he was trying to say, and probably could have put a little bit better, is our economy's in the toilet, our morals are in the toilet. The fact is our reputation worldwide is in the toilet. Almost every factor you can look at in the United States, our educational numbers are dismal compared to the rest of the world. Although our self-esteem is probably, I'd say, number one or number two in the entire world when it comes to all nations, which means we're very happy about being stupid sometimes. But ultimately, I think that you're going to see more of that perspective of putting America first. And with that being said, that means that, and we'll get into this a little bit with Trump's 100-day plan, but you're going to see some of that New World Order, that push towards being more, world-minded. You're going to see a little bit of that back off for a while America takes care of the pruning of our own tree. Because I think, honestly, more of my more liberal friends would probably be okay with that. Because, for me personally, I'm not a neoconservative, man. I do think I'm more center-right, but I am still center. And I'm not a fan of going out there and using taxpayer money to subsidize the peace of the world, getting your brothers and sisters, your aunts and uncles killed in wars that mean nothing, or maybe they're for oil or something ridiculous. I'm not for that, man. I'm not for having a big, strong, standing army. I'm for having a strong army, but the problem is, as the founding fathers understood, is having a standing army means what? You're going to use them. And so to me, I think you got to be very careful about that. But, we'll get a little bit more into that when we talk about Trump's 100-day plan. But I do think that the new world order, with how Benjamin Netanyahu, one of America's oldest friends, is the nation of Israel, and Obama really pushed them out of the way, because Obama's tended to side more with Palestinians and more of the Muslim perspective instead of the Jewish perspective, which to me is totally just insane, because Israel is the only nation in that area of the world that's similar to the United States, where women go to college and, have more of a respected role, and they're not treated like dirt, and they can't be stoned for any number of reasons, or raped by men for honor killed, and all this ridiculous garbage. But, for him to kind of snub Benjamin Netanyahu just goes to show the character I thought President Obama displayed, or how out of touch he was with reality, because that situation over there was just absurd. But I think Trump being in position, you're going to see more of a relationship building with Israel again, and I think that's vitally important. So yeah, the new world order is really kind of being redefined in terms of what's going on the world stage, and I think that's a good thing. Now, with that being said, I want to talk a little bit about Trump's 100-day plan. And the reason for that, I'm going to scroll through some of these because I think it's important to discuss. Now, granted, it's a 100-day plan. I'm not going to sit here for 35 minutes and talk about it. But what I do want to mention is he breaks things down based on essentially economics, constitution, and security. some of the constitutional amendments I think are vitally important. The number one thing, he always talked about draining the swamp, and I think that this is something that everybody should unite around. Okay, everybody should unite around the fact, whether you're a right winger, a left winger, or no winger. Wow, that sounded bad. No matter what you are, the bottom line is you have to have a perspective where you understand these politicians are not listening to you. The Occupy movement was saying it back, 5-6 years ago? The Tea Party movement started saying it 6, 7, 8 years ago. Nobody's listening to us. You're spending. You're giving money to all these big banks. Nobody's going to jail for misdirecting these funds and being fraudulent. Even though Bernie Madoff goes to jail for taking people's money, with unethically, these bankers, man, are freaking doing it all the time. But yeah, nobody's going to jail there. And so I think that this idea of drain the swamp and get the career politicians out is something every American needs. And so the first order of business is for him to try to push for a constitutional amendment to impose term limits on all Congress members. Now, I think you have to have 2/3 of the House and 3/4 of the states ratify or something to that effect. So this is not going to be an easy thing to pass. But I do know there's people out there that would say, well, there are term limits. It's called voting. But the problem with that is, and you can see, is most incumbents stay incumbents. They stay in office until they decide to leave. Although the more America stays vigilant, you'll see less and less of that. But I do think this is a good thing to eliminate career politicians. Now, with that being said, we also understand that America's $16, $17 trillion deficit is not going anywhere. Our deficit really is $60, $70 trillion if you count unfunded liabilities. With that being said, the federal government actually employs more people than most other businesses, than any other business for that matter, in the entire nation. And so with that being said, there's going to be a freeze in terms of every federal service except for public safety, public health, and the military. What is that going to do? Well, it's going to start reducing some of the salary amounts that we're going to be paying out and benefits, etc. And it's going to start eliminating more of the bureaucracy, which leads me to the third point, which he talks about. For every new regulation that the federal government passes, they have to eliminate 2 existing regulations. Now, what does that do? Again, it eliminates bureaucracy, which is what all of us really want. If you vote a man or woman to the Congress of the United States of America, you want those people assisting in creating laws. You don't want a ton of bureaucrats that are unelected creating laws when you did not vote those people in. And so I think that is another good point of view. Another good point is he says, I want a 5-year ban on all White House and congressional officials becoming lobbyists after they leave the government service. Now, what does that do? That ensures that the people, members of Congress, men and women, that they're not going to be getting these backroom deals and getting all this money from these other businesses or promises of a cushy job as soon as they get out of office. They're not going to be able to go right to that. They might be able to do some other position, but they're not going to be able to be a lobbyist. And to me, that's vitally important, again, for draining the swamp. Now, lifetime ban on all White House officials lobbying on behalf of a foreign government. Sorry, Bill and Hillary Clinton. But, that's one of those things that, to me, is mind-boggling. Maybe one show we'll get into that. But let's see. Another ban on foreign lobbyists raising money for American elections. There was a lot of rumor that a lot of Hillary Clinton's election campaign money was coming from Saudi Arabia, which was always amazing to me that more of some of my gay friends would probably vote for Hillary. But the bottom line is the money that she's using for her campaign comes from nations that would put to death gay people. So to me, it's mind-boggling. I can't wrap my mind around it. But with that being said, he also wants to talk about some of the economic issues. And one of the things is repealing NAFTA or renegotiating it. Because, America gets the short end of the stick. And I think when it comes to trade deficit with China or with Mexico, America is getting screwed every year. And I think that's something that's vitally important because it's one of the factors for why jobs get shipped overseas, because cost cutting. And I think some of those things need to be negotiated. I don't sit here and pretend to be an expert on all those subjects, especially NAFTA, because that was well before my time of study. And I haven't really taken the adequate time to talk about it intelligently, so I'm not going to try to do it on this podcast. But the point is, that is another thing that needs to be done. Or the TPP, for that matter. That was passed a year or two ago, and it opens up America, again, Think about what Trump is talking about. Put America first. The TPP is something we need to withdraw from because that was something that left and right were like, no, don't get involved with that. That's just another unelected body of bureaucrats trying to tell the American people and every other nation what to do or what rules to follow when they themselves don't have to follow them. We have enough of that. That's a good decision. Now, what's some other things that really stick out to me in this? This is something that might be a good subject to have debated. I will lift all restrictions on the production of $50 trillion worth of job-producing American energy reserves, including shale, oil, natural gas, and clean coal. Now, what does that mean? Well, I tell you what, President Obama allowed third world nations to come and drill off American soil, okay, or in our waters. He won't let an American company, but he'll let a third world company, which to me is more of that Marxism, that cultural Marxism. It's that idea of, I don't like, I guess you want to say, colonial style governments. He doesn't like the bigger Western nations, including his own nation of which he's president. He'd rather, instead of giving more colonial power over, these smaller nations, he'd rather give a third world or a second world nation the chance to generate the revenue. Now, granted, I'm not saying that's not a noble thing, but when you're costing Americans jobs, when you're costing tax revenue to us that we could use to pay down our debt, to me that's gross misconduct. That is completely ridiculous. And I think Donald Trump's going to try to get that pushed back. For another day, I'm sure, as this continues to evolve, a lot of these subjects will be fleshed out more. I look forward to getting more involved with these, but what's some more he's got here? Infrastructure. That's a huge deal. The United States has terrible infrastructure. As a matter of fact, even take something like Wi-Fi. America, when it comes to our Wi-Fi speeds, we're in like the middle maybe. Last time I checked, we were in like the middle of the class or of the groupings, all over the world for industrialized nations. And there's no reason that some of these nations have greater Wi-Fi service than us, but it's just the idea of, internet connections, our roads, our bridges, all these things are really broken down. I mean, I tell you what, the town I live in, we're becoming like little Indianapolis, for God's sake, man. There's construction going on everywhere. But there's a lot of areas all over the United States that have terrible infrastructure. And for companies to come here and reinvest money into these environments, there needs to be infrastructure better suited to make sure that their shipping and everything goes much more smoothly. So I think that's another very good decision on behalf of Donald Trump. What's some more that he's talking about here? Let's see. Take money from UN climate change programs and use money to fix America's water and environmental infrastructure. Now, me personally, I think that's a great idea. Because let's just face it, I'm going to call it right here. Global warming is not real. Okay? Global warming is a farce. The bottom line is this. The polar ice caps are not melting. Science has shown, I think NASA themselves has taken pictures showing that the polar ice caps are bigger now than they were not that long ago. The Earth is like a ginormous filter, and mankind is awful arrogant to think that we can do anything to this big blue dot in the middle of an unknown sized universe, okay? But I will say the Earth is a filter of sorts, and our climate change is cyclical, and sometimes we're a little warmer, sometimes we're a little cooler, but it's not a doomsday scenario. The problem that I have is the people projecting this have been caught, like, say, ClimateGate a few years ago. They were caught, completely manipulating the information just to get money. It's a money-making scheme, and businesses want to take part in it. Vehicle manufacturers want to try to come in there and sell you a generic car that runs on something that's supposed to be more energy efficient. It's not. It's garbage. And then, unfortunately, more progressive left-wing Democrats, especially, they want to control what you're able to eat, watch, wear, how much energy you use. They're controllers, man. At least the far, far left are. And, the green movement is really not much different than the red movement. If you don't understand what I'm saying, please go research it. You'll understand. But so I think this is a good idea. And for those of you out there that are still complaining about the water in Michigan, well, there you go. Here's a solution for it. Next, moving on to, let's see here. Of course, talking about taking away. Oh, this is a good one. We got to spend a couple minutes on this. So almost everybody I hear on the left or people I know call Donald Trump a racist. Why? Because of what he said about Hispanics. Now, first of all, I want to clarify. Donald Trump did not say that all Hispanics were rapists, murderers, etc., drug dealers. He said there's a lot of great people that are here, but there's a lot of them that are coming here that are criminals. And so what Donald Trump plans to do with illegal immigrants is to, number one, cut funding for sanctuary cities. So California, there's a ton of them over there for you. You're already bankrupt as a state. You're terribly ran. California is the picture of what a full liberalized America will do. It'll be in the toilet. We'll be in debt 10 times worse than we are now because we'll allow every Tom, Dick, and Harry to cross the border, come over here and get stuff for free. And that's just not the way the real world works. But Trump's idea of defunding sanctuary cities to me is perfect. And then immediately deporting the 2 million plus criminal illegal immigrants that are in this nation. He's going to do that. I do have a little bit of reverence or a reservation rather in terms of how he's going to do the other millions of illegal immigrants that are in this country. Many of them that have a job, they have a family, and they're living the American dream and they're good citizens. And people like that, especially when you're an entrepreneur, I don't want you leaving. I do think they need to work on a way to fast track some of these people, but ultimately there needs to be a penalty because you broke the law. And as John Adams says, we're not a nation of laws, we're a nation of men. And if you become a nation of men, not of laws, that's what we have today. That's why Hillary Clinton or one of these Washington politicians can get away with murder, whereas with you, if you did any little thing, the federal government will bring down the hammer of justice quicker than Thor on an ice giant. Okay, so that's why that is important. And for some people, they don't understand it. Please understand, it's not about race. It's about law. Next, what are we going to talk about? Let's see. Suspend immigration from terror-prone regions. Duh. If you look at all these terrorist attacks happening all over Europe, we've had some in the United States by people who are Muslim, who allowed their faith to take them to a completely different direction. I know people that are Muslim. I have had Muslim friends and coworkers that were good people, and they wouldn't do anything like this. But I do think it's important that we're vetting people. Although I don't know how important that vetting process is because some of the people that have committed these acts of terror have been vetted. So I don't even know if that's really going to do a lot, but I do think it's better than nothing. And so to me personally, I don't think that's a bad thing. But the next thing and the last thing I want to touch on is the middle class tax relief. The middle class has been strained. And no matter what President Obama or the Democrats try to tell you, the economic system in the United States is not better now than it was or has not gotten better. You can look at an unemployment number and you can spar that number and kind of manipulate it, but that number isn't legit. That single-digit number is really double-digit because there's been tens of millions of Americans who fell off the government doles, thereby they do not reflect in the numbers. And so with that being said, there's a record number of Americans not currently in the workforce. And we're going back to the Depression. And so with that being said, that shows that the economic system in the United States is really squeezing the middle class. And with that being said, Donald Trump's plan is to get up to a 35% tax cut for a middle class family with 2 children and really start to eliminate the brackets between 30 and then small businesses, for example, between 35 to 15% tax rate. We're going to see a lot of those begin to kick in not long after he takes office. But this idea is that they can grow the economy around 4% and create 25 million new jobs over the coming years, and try to bring more of those businesses back. I think that's a good thing. More money in our pocket is what we're supposed to be about. I mean, that's the American dream: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Or if you're John Locke, pursuit of property. But the idea is the fruit of my labor is mine. And, we dump tea in the bay for percentages of a penny. And yet today, they can take 25% of all your money in taxes. And so I think the more money the American public is allowed to have and spend and save is going to be good for us. But ultimately, the last thing I want to touch on would just be the idea for school choice, because let's face it, man, liberal Common Core is a nightmare in schools, especially young African American and Hispanic children, and of course white children as well, but just people that are disproportionately in poor neighborhoods. The way that we fund schools is atrocious. You set young people up for failure from the jump. And that is why when I say this show, 8-Bit Politics, even though we reference pop culture, we are a serious show. There's times we're throwing stuff out there about pop culture, but ultimately I feel like gamers and fans of pop culture are intelligent and we're inclusive and we should be able to have these discussions. And I think a lot of us do want to have these discussions. And so with that being said, I look at like this. People are set up for failure in the United States. And that's why I wanted to make sure that when we titled this show, we made the point to say that we're liberal conservatarians. In other words, we bring all three of those popular groups, libertarians, conservatives, and liberals, all together to show people that we have perspectives that can go in all classes. And that's when you know that if you're that way too, you think for yourself, because you can't let people put you in a box, man. No matter who says what, whether it's your church, your coworkers, your family, you can't let people put you in a box, because God and or nature makes you to be intelligent, to think for yourself, to create. And so you have to create your own opinions, and then of course be faithful enough and have no fear and display those opinions. And so for me personally, yes, I would support being able to offer, whether it's a religious school, a homeschool, a private school, a charter school, etc. I believe that should be redone, allow these younger people of all races, all faiths, all economic statuses to be able to pick something better suited for them and their children. So yeah, I think that's an amazing thing. Now, 2 little quick bullet points that I want to finish up is, first of all, I was asked last week by a friend, Ryan, why last week on your previous episode did you say that the mainstream media is in the tank and should have essentially been working for Obama's campaign back in the day in 2008, 2012? It's because they are. As a matter of fact, there was a study that was done and posted by the Washington Times not that long ago, and it was actually conducted by journalism professors at Indiana University. And they actually surveyed that 7% of all journalists identify as Republicans, and 90% of all D.C. journalists vote Democrat. They actually quoted a man that said, D. Eliseo fails to acknowledge, however, that while some balance might be found online, the majority of large mainstream media outlets are in fact left-leaning, end quote. And that goes without saying. I mean, if you literally step back for a moment and you look at this objectively, Fox News is all that you have on television. So if you're a conservative, the only hope you have to hear anything that's even close to your opinion is to watch Fox News, or maybe watch, maybe watch Joe Scarborough on MSNBC, because Joe was a Republican congressman, if I'm not mistaken. But that's about it, man. I mean, most of these other people, go back and please, I don't have time to go over right now. We're running over. But if you go on YouTube and look at some of the videos that these celebrities and these pundits on the air, even guys like Stephen Colbert or Bill Maher, or, even though they're not, of course, Stephen Colbert, he's on cable, or Bill Maher's on HBO, so that's not really the same thing. But go back and look at some of these pundits. Go and look at Rachel Maddow when Trump was licking the H-bomb, and just destroying Hillary Clinton. Go back and look at her demeanor. Go look at Chris Matthews on MSNBC. He said the word Jesus. He took the Lord's name in vain while he was looking at the screen because Trump was winning and he couldn't believe it. These people are shown, and that's one of the reasons I think that the media failed the Democratic Party, because let's just face it, nobody trusts the media anymore. That's why websites like the Drudge Report destroy every other news site on the internet. The Drudge Report is the god of the news websites, period. And they talk about, they're more conservative, obviously, but that's the place conservatives go for news, man. We ain't watching the news on CNN, on MSNBC and CNN, because we already know the jig is up. You guys were outed. Even going back to when, what was that guy's name? It wasn't Dan. Dan Rather, I think, was one of them too, that was caught, twisting the story to make George Bush look bad. Remember that? These kind of guys are caught all the time in this media manipulation. Conservatives notice it because every time I turn on the news, it's always some condescending remark, and they always try to play the good guy. Remember last week I talked about the Thor and Loki factor. These Democrats, these liberals that act like they're midline, or they act act like they're in the middle, but really they're hardcore leftists. They're progressive. And so they just use their platform to get their views over by being condescending about people who, like me, they would call me racist, homophobic, whatever. Even though I'm clearly not, but that's the narrative they put out there about Donald Trump. And guess what? It failed miserably because the people got so tired of hearing about this man. We started realizing for 30 years he's been in the public eye and never had these kind of aspersions cast at him until he ran against a Democrat presidential nomination and candidacy. So you see, clearly they were outed. And all you have to do is go on YouTube and look at a bunch of clips of them being condescending and rude, and it blew up in their face like a bomb. And to me, that's why I said that comment. And that person that asked me about, you're right. There's definitely right-wing sites. But Fox News is all that we have on cable. And unfortunately, low-information voters is what America has predominantly. Just people that only know what they read on their Facebook and their Twitter feed, or maybe what they see on MSNBC or CNN at night. That's about it. They're not reading books. They're not reading scholarly articles. They're not researching and educating themselves. That's why you kept hearing the same thing. Donald Trump's a racist, misogynist, et cetera, but he's not. He's not, and it's so ridiculous to continue to hear, but that shows the uneducation on behalf of a lot of voter bloc for the Democrats. But lastly, I just want to talk about real quick sports entertainment. Sports entertainment. I'm a big fan of sports entertainment since the day I saw Hulkamania, Body Slam, Andre the Giant, WrestleMania 3, Pontiac Silverdome, 93,000 people. 1987 was a great year for me. 7 years old, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, Hulkamania fan, elbow dropping and leg dropping my, my $1 Million Man, my buddy doll, okay? So sports entertainment has been a huge part of my life and relationship building in my life. A lot of friends. We bonded over pro wrestling. And the reason I wanted to end the show with this subject, and that is, back in the day when Trump was running and this first started, I thought to myself, and I'm going to get something to drink, pardon me if you don't mind. Thank God for coffee at 10:39 p.m. But anyway, Trump used to donate to Hillary Clinton's campaign. And of course, he would donate to other people's campaign, but the idea that he was a Clinton supporter in the sense of funding. Now, you could say he was just covering all his bases, just like banks will, give money to both people that are running, Democrats or Republicans. But there was this that came in my mind one time is, what if he's a plant? What if he's a plant just to make Republicans look bad or to destroy the Republican Party and just make this phony race? Obviously, I don't think that is now, but there was kind of that disclosure. And the fact that if you watch professional wrestling, when Kane and The Undertaker were during their big feud, or Hogan and Andre, or Austin and Vince McMahon, on television, they look like they hate each other, but really backstage, they're kicking it, having beers, going to strip clubs, and all manner of crazy stuff, right? So there really was nothing. Everything you saw on television was fake. The feud was contrived. Now, the reason I want to talk about the political system and just drop this in your heads, I want you to think about this, is what we're seeing today with all the political situation, the back and forth. Is this stuff real? I mean, do these people really hate each other? Do these people really disagree with each other that bad? Or is it like sports entertainment and they're just playing this show out in front of us? And I think that's something that is vitally important for us. Because ultimately, I think most Americans, you know what? Me being a Christian, I don't want too much in life. I want to be able to serve my God. I want to be able to talk about Jesus without fear of being fined or thrown in a jail. But you know what? I also want to be able to hear what you have to say. Because the First Amendment doesn't protect speech you like. It protects the speech you don't. Secondly, I like to have money in my pocket. Don't know many people that won't. You can't spend hopes and dreams, but you can spend Benjamins. And so I want money in my pocket, right? I want my children, or maybe you want your children, I'm sure, or your children that will be, to have a better life than you. I think that's just a part of the American dream. And ultimately I want to be free. I want to be able to do and think what I feel. I want to be able to, if I want to eat a donut the size of a Honda Civic and die early, I don't want the government trying to tell me how to live my life, okay? I do not need a big brother or big sister in the sky in Washington telling me how to eat, what to say, what to think, what to drive, what temperature I set my freaking thermometer on. I want them out of my life as much as humanly possible. I think most people want that as well. And lastly, I want to be able to walk down the street and feel like I'm safe in my own country. where I don't have to feel like I'm going to have a terrorist attack because we're not enforcing legal laws or that we're not fighting enemies the right way. I think being able to have religious freedom, being able to feel safe, being able to provide for your family a better future than you had, I think all of those things are the basics of what we want in life. And we need to think for just a second until next episode, is what we're seeing out here with these politicians, is this real? Are they really in a heated battle for the future of this republic? Or is what we're looking at a live action WWE WrestleMania promotional poster? I'll leave that for you to find out. And for this week, I can't forget, this week, the person that goes on our Chris Jericho inspired list is going to be, well, actually, man, there's so many. How about Amy Schumer? Okay, there you go. Amy Schumer, we'll go to her. She sucks as a comedian, as an actress. In my personal opinion, actually, I'm totally fibbing. I haven't watched this girl in anything, but I at least hate her opinions. Because she came out and said she'd leave the United States if Donald Trump wasn't elected. Then she came back out and said, oh, well, you took me out of context. And then she put that bogus article of Donald Trump's that said, that he would run as a Republican. We talked about it last week. She put that on her on this Twitter feed, or on this Facebook post, I'm sorry, and said, oh yeah, well, look at this is what's going on, blah blah blah. And then at the very end of the article, she said that particular picture was false and phony. Well, that just goes to show you that the level of, or lack of, intelligence and the ignorance on behalf of somebody like that would put that out there and make aspersions about tens of millions of the United States citizens, and call us names, call us racist, call us misogynist, call us all these different terrible things, all the while acting like you're a pillar of virtue and so tolerant, all the while spewing hatred. So to me, because of that, you, Miss Schumer, end up on the list. And that is all for this second episode for this week, November 16th, 2016. And for next week, we have even more planned. I can't wait. I'm not gonna tease it though just yet. So be on the lookout. Please make sure you go to mixcloud.com/8bitpolitics and download these podcasts for free. And please make sure that you follow our page as well, because we have plenty more things in the future coming up. And we look forward to seeing you guys. And until next time, we'll see you soon.